Good afternoon again, and this is My Dear China, where we look at issues regarding China and the good people of China in the hopes that things will change for the better. The government has come up with so many policies and concepts that make it very difficult for the good people of China to have a productive, enjoyable life. So today I'm going to discuss two issues that are affecting the local Chinese population to a great degree. One is the Gaokao, which is their exam for their children that they do after grade 12 to see if they can get into one of the better universities. And the second thing is the Hukou, which is basically a passport for the Chinese population, which kind of renders them the ability to not move around the country, but to stay in one place. So I don't know if you knew this, but the Gaokao exam is very similar to that other archaic law, the Hukou, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Both are intended to keep rural children in their hometown and offer them only a slight chance of advancement. And how does this happen, you would ask? A prominent educator in China pointed out, so again, this isn't coming from the West, this is coming from a prominent Chinese educator. So you can deduce what you want from these ideas that he's discussed. You can imagine that a 9-hour exam is a pretty hefty exam. You would also think that it would be homogeneous through all of China, from the south to the north and the east and the west. It would be the same exam for all the kids to write prior to going on to university. Well, you'd be wrong. The Chinese scholar pointed out that the Gaokao exam in the rural areas of China is far more difficult than the one in the first-tier cities. His conclusion was, in order to keep the rural students in their rural areas and not to have them come to the big cities to attend universities, making their exam harder would mean their marks would be lower than the students in the bigger cities. So in a nutshell, students in the big cities remain in the big cities and get first crack at the universities in those big cities. Students in rural areas get lower marks, so are delegated to vocational instruction in smaller cities. This is another classic example of CCP controlling the good people of China from birth until death. So first of all, now then, let's look at the Hukou. It's basically a population registration, not unlike the census that we have in other countries, crossed with an in-country passport. An individual can be either urban or rural. A person's Hukou is attached to a city or local municipality and determines where they have access to social services like hospitals and schools. This causes a huge problem, particularly for the rural people, as in order to make some money other than farming, these people have to go to the big cities, the first, second, and third tier cities, and they're known as migrant workers. They do not have social services like hospitals and schools, so 99% of the time their children do not follow them to these big cities, so the parents leave them at home. Now, this is another issue that I'll talk about in a couple of minutes here after we talk about the Hukou. Now, the Hukou can be changed, the status can be changed from urban to rural, but there are serious risks for doing this. For example, there are questions surrounding land rights. If one is to switch from rural to urban, with land continuously increasing in value, most who have purchased land using their rural Hukou are often hesitant to risk it in exchange for the urban Hukou. The Hukou system also has implications for the employers. For example, some employees, particularly local new graduates from foreign universities, or workers who have completed working and social security requirements, may be seeking sponsorship in order to apply for an urban Hukou. In other words, employee mobility could be limited by Hukou regulations. Now, in Canada, as an example, I could be working in Vancouver, Canada, and go, oh, I think I'm going to go get a job in Halifax. I can get on a plane or train, go 5,000 miles across the country, and start work. I still have my same social benefits. I still have my medical benefits. I have everything, because it doesn't matter where you go in Canada, you are not limited to where you can or cannot go. And this is obviously not what happens in China. That Hukou passport is good for your town, your village only. Now, I will say that in the last few weeks, I have heard some news that some cities, I think Guangzhou is one of them, are allowing people to go to different areas, but only in that province, and are not being basically chastised for being born in that city. Now, the idea behind the system establishment was that because rural areas had the most opportunity to utilize labor, Chinese government felt that a large majority of the country's population should live and work in those regions. This idea led to the belief that giving citizens the ability to move freely around the country could pose a threat to agricultural output. Again, so here's a classic example. Having 1.4 million people in your population is not an asset. In fact, it's a detriment. Because if these people leave the farm areas, where are they going to get their food from? So now what we have here is 200 million city dwellers still living without the urban Hukou status. These members of the Chinese society often treated as second-class citizens. Again, migrant workers. Now, when I was in Beijing, there was a small fire in one of the migrant workers' settlements, and the mayor of Beijing took it upon himself at that time to spring to action, and in 2 days, kicked 1.3 million transient workers out of Beijing in November. It was cold, it was unpleasant, and they moved out 1.3 million transient workers and sent them back to their hometowns, so to speak. If a citizen of Beijing with their urban passport attempted to help these people in any way by providing them with food or water or a hot coffee or transportation or whatever, they lost social points. They were chastised and they were spoken to by the local police department. The 1.3 people were moved out of Beijing, and 2 days later, the bulldozers came in and leveled all of their accommodation under the guise of it being a dangerous situation and a dangerous place to live. Now, the next thing is these 200 million city-dwelling migrant workers have 60 million children who've been left behind for themselves, to fend for themselves, I should say, and to be taken care of either by the oldest sibling or by the aged grandparents. Now, let's put this in some kind of perspective here. These kids are being left behind because if they follow their parents to the city where their parents have gone to eke out a living, they don't have the Hukou or that passport to allow them to be in that city where they can get social services. And for children, that means education. So in a lot of these first-tier cities, elementary schools, primary schools, spring out of nowhere and are developed the children of migrant workers. Funding for them, as far as I can see, was next to none. I went to an elementary school with 40 kindergarten kids. There wasn't even a blackboard on the wall. For break at 10:20, they all lined up in the kitchen area with a little tin cup in their hand, and they received a cup of hot water. While 400 yards away in a Chinese private school, the kids were going to the cafeteria and getting hot chocolate, milk, waffles, fruit, eggs, bacon, cheese, toast, a full variety of food. And again, a few hundred yards away, kids were getting a glass of hot water. These children, the immigrant children, migrant workers' children, are poorly dressed for inclement weather. They do not maintain their cleanliness. They don't brush their teeth. They don't get nutritious food. Who's looking after them? A 13-year-old sibling who has to go out and cut wood, put it into the fireplace, fire it up, cook for them in the morning, clean their clothes where possible. These kids are filthy. 60 million. So let's put this into perspective. The entire population of Canada is 37 million people. Men, women, and children. 37 million. In China, you have 60 million migrant worker children of 200 million migrant workers. 60 million children. In Canada, if so much as one child is seen walking the streets dressed like these children, or as dirty as these children, or as unfed as these children, they would automatically be picked up by child services right across Canada. With 60 million children in such poor conditions, China is raising a lost generation. Moving on to the Gaokao, the examination. It's a standardized college exam held annually in mainland China. It's required to get entrance into all higher education institutions at the undergraduate level in the country, and it's usually taken by students in their third or last year of senior high school. Now, further to deepen the stemming criticism that's been leveled against this system, it's the most pressure-packed examination in the world. I've seen it personally. These kids get taken by their parents who get all dressed up and stand outside the school for the hours that it takes for them to write the exam. Government trucks come in with special devices or systems to knock out all of the frequencies because the cheating is rampant. Because what's at stake for these kids is, do I get into a university, a good university, or don't I? Should I cheat? It's probably a good idea. You might as well hand these kids a phone book and say, memorize it. Western education teaches kids how to think. The Gaokao teaches kids what to think. What's the difference? Well, first of all, a dictatorship, a government, a dictatorial government, much prefers having people who listen to what they're being told and don't think about it. So that causes a huge problem. Now, during this exam period, unbelievable things happen. Parents go to doctors to get them to prescribe pills for their daughters so they're not menstruating during the exam because they don't want that to happen. Schools put suicide nets around the school so kids don't jump out the window. The school that I was at, there were 3 suicides at that time when the Gaokao exams were going on. So I'm fully aware of children and the effect that the Gaokao exam and the requirements of it mean to certain kids. So you have to ask yourself a question. You've got this huge Politburo of the CCP, and where are their kids going to school? Are they going to these Chinese schools where they have to write the Gaokao exam? No. The emperor himself, where did his daughter go to school? Oh, Harvard. Harvard University in America. And where do the children of all of these other Politburo members go to school after grade 12? Do they write the Gaokao exam? No. They go to school in Australia, England, Holland, America, Canada. Those kids aren't writing that exam to get into universities in China. They're just writing their final exam. Many of them are in private school anyway in China. So they're just writing the local grade 12 exam and so on. And so off they go to America or Canada or wherever. And if they don't do well on their exams, they simply ask the foreign teacher, could you please give me a better mark? How many times was I asked that? Would you give me a better mark because I'm trying to get into McGill University? I would write you a good letter if you actually did the work that you were supposed to do while you were here in class. Because I knew fully well that they would still get a letter explaining how wonderful they were. And I know that because I got an email from McGill University saying, thank you for your letter on such and such a student and letting us know how well she did in school. I didn't send a letter. I didn't give her a letter. They go outside the school and they go to special people who write these letters for them and make sure that everything is looking good for them. In other words, it's transcripts are edited to make them look way better than they are. And that's another sad problem caused by this Gaokao with the pressure that these kids are put under. The parents want to relieve that pressure from them. No parent wants their kid to commit suicide. And in the great numbers, it happens when this Gaokao exam comes around. So they kind of release that pressure by A, sending them to an international school overseas, or even international schools within China that don't have those same demands. So again, we've covered 2 things in this little discussion. The Hukou, which is a passport, which keeps people static in their hometown and village and disallows them from going out and enjoying or having a good life in other parts of China. The second thing is the Gaokao, which is their exam, touted to be the most difficult exam on the entire planet, which it probably is. But again, it's a case of showing students what they want you to learn and not how to learn, which is the biggest difference imaginable. Okay, so this is what kids are operating under today, and parents, like of the migrant worker group, 200 million migrant workers in China, by the way, remember, and there's 60 million children. It's a very devastating life, and everything I've looked at, including from Chinese sources, are these migrant workers are treated worse than second-class citizens. And again, I saw that example myself when those 1.3 million transit workers were kicked out of Beijing because it was a small fire. It's not fair. It's not the way people should be living. But again, they're living under constant fear. So to do something against one of these systems, to argue the point, to confront the point publicly, is going to get you disappeared, questioned, or have a tea session down at the local police station. That's what keeps the CCP going, is the fear that people have of what will happen if they make any waves in an attempt to improve their lifestyle. On that note, we'll leave that one. You have a good day, and think about what I've said, particularly when it comes to the children of migrant workers in China and how they're treated. And I've seen them. I've been to those schools. I've volunteered at those schools. I bought equipment for those schools. You don't treat little kids that way. You don't dump them like a hot potato because they left their hometown to be with their parents, and now they have no social network whatsoever to support them. Okay?